If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.
This episode is brought to you by Tic Tac. Your boss is going off at you for missing a deadline, and you swear the clock just moved backwards. Suddenly, you remember the pack of Tic Tacs on your desk. Now you're riding horseback on the beach, the smell of citrus in the air. And what's this? Your boss is sitting behind you, breathing heavenly fresh mint? Refresh your mouth and mind and share your good vibes with Tic Tac.
Well, Sunday morning. With us today is Paul Zuber, and he is the Senior Vice President in charge of the Business Council of the State of New York. They represent over 3,000 businesses. Well, Paul Zuber, the debate is done. Let's see what happens now. Meanwhile, if Mondami wins, we're going to lose the city and the state, and new regulations are coming.
Yeah, you're right. New regulations are coming, and I think that, there are things that have been discussed in this campaign that, obviously are concerning to the business community. Obviously there's been discussions about increasing the corporate franchise tax, which, luckily Governor Hochul has said that she's not in support of. But I do want to say one thing to that, which is I think we're all being a little bit cute with what the corporate franchise tax is in New York. Yes, our corporate franchise tax in New York is below New Jersey's, but what people have to understand is that there is also a New York City business corporation tax, which in itself for the highest corporations is a little over 8%. So when you take the 8% and you add the 7+% that's already exists with the corporation franchise tax, and you add the 30% surcharge that any business has in the MTA district, raising the corporate franchise tax could push taxes for New York City businesses as high as 20%. And, that's a problem. And we already have a problem in New York with a system now where our energy is really under duress and stress. The New York Independent System Operators, which oversees the grid, keeps track of our electric grid, has come out with a new report that basically says because we've been unable to replace aged out electrical generation plants with new plants and new forms of energy, that New York City in particular and Long Island, the grids are very, very vulnerable right now. And the problem that we have with that as a business community is, let's think about what the next stage or the next big growth in the economy will be. It's all tech, right? And what do you need to create data centers? You need energy. What do you need for semiconductor plants? You need energy. What do you even need for pharmaceuticals? You need energy, right? So without this energy, it's not just the public who's in danger. And let me just say the public is in danger, because if the grid goes, it could not only go in the summertime, but it could go in the wintertime. But it's also damaging the growth or the potential growth of businesses in New York State. And I think what the NISO, that's what we affectionately call it here in New York, says is something that we really have to consider, and it's something that the Business Council has said over and over and over and again. There is nothing wrong with supporting renewable energy, but there needs to be an all-above approach. We need to look at nuclear energy. We need to look at natural gas. We need to look at solar, and we need to look at wind, and we need to put them all together to provide enough electricity on the grid that we as an economy can continue to move forward, and our most vulnerable New Yorkers are protected. You, John, you're down in New York City. You have a law now in New York City that's going to require all buildings to be electric. How are you going to do that?
How is that possible?
I have no clue, considering what the independent system operators have said about the grid. I don't know how you can do that unless people start being realistic. They start looking to the fact that there is nothing wrong with natural gas, that they start looking at nuclear energy. Look, there are homes on Long Island that are still heated with oil. Would you rather have them heated with oil, or would you rather have them heated with natural gas? Natural gas is much more environmentally friendly than oil. So we have to think about these things in realistic terms.
I like oil because oil doesn't blow up. Sometimes gas does.
Yeah, sometimes gas does. That's true. But but when you're
anytime you've heard house explodes, guess what? They didn't have oil.
They didn't have oil. But, when you're talking about greenhouse gas emissions, but there's a group of people out there that don't want anything but solar and wind. And I understand the desire to make sure
there are people that thought
economy.
that there was a Columbus Day last week. There were people that thought that the earth was flat.
Yeah. And the fact is it's been shown over and over again that this climate leadership Community Protection Act, or CLCPA as we call it, isn't working. It's time to go back to the drawing board and figure out what works for us, both economically and for the benefit of the consumers. Because we also have to worry about the cost, right? We at the Business Council have been talking about this forever. It's like, what is the cost to the consumers? Consumers cannot take or afford to have their energy bills increase. And you're seeing, like right now in New Jersey, what's the big issue in the governor's race in New Jersey? Everybody in Jersey is really upset because their electric bills are through the roof, right? And
you got to remember, Paul, you have to remember, the fact is, in New York City, you got the congestion tax, you got the tax, then commercial rent tax, the taxes, the real estate tax, so it's a tax on top of the tax. I mean, it just keeps multiplying itself. And we and you have talked about it before. I mean, if you're standing in New York City, between state and city, you got $360 billion in budget versus Florida with a lesser population only has 110. So where's the rest of the money coming?
And John, we talked about this before. You have an economy now that isn't so locked into one particular area. So you don't necessarily need to be in New York to do business in New York, right? Hence why you're seeing Texas even opening up their own stock exchange, right? So we're in competition with every other state. So when our electric grid is not reliable, it makes New York State unreliable to businesses. When our taxes are high, it makes New York State unreliable.
How many of your 3,000 businesses are considering moving out of state, and how many people are considering moving back into the state?
Well, there's an interesting. A while back, we had a poll of it was for upstate CEOs, and we asked the question: if you could start your business in another state, would you? And it was It was over 50% said they would start their business in another state. So that kind of tells you where people are. They're frustrated with the cost. They're frustrated with regulations. And I'm hopeful that Governor Hochul hears this call, right? Here's this heed or this push by businesses to kind of try to fix it. You can't tax us to death. You can't regulate us to death. You have to provide us the necessary energy to move forward with some projects. Look, AI and tech is a big generator, but no one's putting a data center or be able to put a data center in New York if they don't have enough juice on the grid, right? And that's a problem, and we have to start thinking about ways to solve that problem.
Paul Zuber, thank you for filling in all businesses in New York and all common sense people, and let's catch up again real soon.
All right, thank you, John.
If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.